My pregnant wife ignored my protests and went on an overseas trip with her high school boyfriend. My pregnant wife ignored every single protest I made and decided to go on an overseas trip with her high school boyfriend. She did not try to keep it discreet either. She posted a picture on Facebook with a caption that read, "Felipe, even though we cannot be together as husband and wife, I am still going to have your child." In the photo, they were holding hands and hugging like a couple without a care in the world. It was a gut punch, but I could not let her get away with it. I commented under her post, "If you are so in love with him, is it not time to kick me out and make it official?" After I hit send, I felt something snap inside me. No more. That was the moment I decided I was done. I did not waste any time. I called the postpartum care center where I had reserved a spot for her recovery and canceled it immediately. I also called the women's clinic, Viden Weistra, and canceled all the appointments I had painstakingly scheduled to make sure everything went smoothly for her. The thousands of baby items I had already purchased, cribs, clothes, diapers, and whatnot, I returned every single item I could and gave away the rest. Once all of it was gone, I sat down, exhaled, and felt a weight lifting off my chest. I was finally free from her control, at least in that moment. To clear my head, I called a few close friends and invited them out for drinks. These were friends I had barely seen since marrying Sabrina because she made it nearly impossible. Whenever I spent time with them, she called them drunks, losers, or blamed them for any inconvenience in our lives. But tonight, I needed to see them. We met up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed and genuinely enjoyed myself. Midway through our night, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen, and my smile immediately vanished. It was Sabrina. The room went quiet as my friends noticed my change in expression. One of them, concerned, suggested, "If she's calling, maybe you should head home before she causes a scene." Another chimed in, "Yeah, let's call it a night. You know how she gets." But I shook my head. "Forget her," I said, trying to muster confidence. "Let's keep going. I'm not letting her ruin this." I could tell my friends were uneasy. They had seen firsthand how controlling and toxic Sabrina could be. One of them, Felipe, started to say something, but I cut him off. "Listen," I said firmly. "I know you're worried about me, but let me make one thing clear. When Sabrina gets back, I'm filing for divorce. She will not be your sister-in-law anymore." The table fell silent. They exchanged uncomfortable glances but did not say anything. My phone vibrated again. This time, I hesitated before answering. On the other end of the line, Sabrina's shrill, furious voice erupted. "Juan Alvarez, who do you think you are, ignoring my calls? If this happens again, you will be sleeping on the couch for a month." I stayed silent as she continued her tirade. Eventually, she snapped, "Why did you cancel the postpartum care center? They called me, and if they had not, I would still be in the dark. Are you even planning to be this baby's father? If not, do not worry. There are plenty of other men who would be thrilled to." Her words stung, but at the same time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For years, I had bent over backward for her. When she got pregnant, I treated her like royalty. I booked the best postpartum care center in Napa Valley at $10,000 a month without a second thought. I gave her everything she asked for because I loved her. And what did I get in return? Disrespect and manipulation. "Are you even listening to me?" she screeched, snapping me out of my thoughts. "Yes, I'm listening," I replied calmly. "What seems to be the issue?" "The issue is that you are going to fix it," she shouted. "Rebook the care center and send me another $10,000. Felipe and I want to extend our trip for a few more days." I could not help it. I laughed out loud. "Sabrina, have you lost your mind?" The moment those words left my mouth, she exploded. "Juan Alvarez, what did you just say? Repeat that. If you were a real man, you would never talk to me like that. Do you want me to file for divorce?" This was not the first time she had thrown around the threat of divorce. It was her trump card, the weapon she used in every argument to get her way. And every time, I gave in. I apologized, took the blame, and did everything I could to calm her down, thinking that if I sacrificed enough, we would eventually be happy. But I had finally reached my breaking point. Taking a deep breath, I raised my glass and said, "Fine, let's get divorced then." Without waiting for her response, I hung up and turned off my phone. My friends stared at me, wide-eyed. One of them finally broke the silence. "Well, are you okay?" I smirked and raised my glass higher. "Why are you all frozen? Let's toast to my freedom." The tension broke and laughter erupted around the table. Glasses clinked together as we cheered. Drinks flowed, and for the first time in years, I felt a genuine sense of happiness. Later that night, I collapsed onto my bed with a smile on my face. The buzz of alcohol and the euphoria of freedom filled me with peace. For too long, my life had revolved around Sabrina's demands. She controlled every aspect of my existence, and I let her. But now, I was done. I had been the one cooking, cleaning, and making sure our home was a sanctuary while she focused on her sports career. I didn't mind at first. Relationships are about give and take, right? But somewhere along the way, she must have started believing she was some kind of royalty, untouchable and above everything. That illusion shattered when, one morning, I woke up to an angry symphony of banging on my apartment door. At first, I thought someone was working on renovations in the building, but the noise was persistent, insistent, and clearly aimed at my door. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was. I could already hear their muffled voices through the door, growing louder and angrier by the second. "Juan Alvarez, open this door right now!" Carla's shrill voice cut through like nails on a chalkboard. "How dare you cancel the postpartum care and the hospital appointments? Are you even human?" The irritation I'd suppressed for years bubbled under my skin, but I didn't rush. Instead, I calmly poured myself a glass of water, letting her anger echo through the hallway while I mentally prepared for what I knew was coming. By the time I opened the door, Carla and Gustavo's faces were as red as ripe tomatoes. Without waiting for an invitation, they stormed into the apartment, brushing past me like they owned the place. Carla didn't waste a second before barking orders. "You need to fix this immediately, Juan. Sabrina is coming back tonight, and everything has to be perfect." Her words hung in the air like a bad smell. I leaned against the doorframe and asked, "Is she bringing Felipe with her?" My tone was icy, and I made no effort to hide it. Carla's defensive reaction was instant. "What are you implying? Sabrina is coming back alone. Stop talking nonsense." "Oh, and I heard you got a $15,000 bonus at work," Carla added, her voice dripping with entitlement. "When are you going to give that to Sabrina?" At this point, I couldn't hold back the bitter chuckle that escaped my lips. Their audacity was genuinely impressive in the worst way possible. Gustavo, ever the meddling patriarch, chimed in, his voice heavy with expectation. "So, when will you give the money to my daughter?" "You must have misunderstood something," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "I'm asking Sabrina for a divorce." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels alive with tension. Carla's face contorted in shock, and she staggered back as if my words had physically struck her. Gustavo crossed his arms, trying to maintain his air of authority, but it was clear he hadn't seen this coming. Their reaction only fueled my resolve. For the first time in years, I felt like I had some control. "You can't be serious, Juan," Carla finally spat out. "Sabrina will never agree to this." I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "Sabrina doesn't have a choice, Carla. She crossed every line, and so did all of you." Gustavo stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "You're overreacting," he said in his usual condescending tone. "Divorce is a serious decision. You can't just decide something like this in the heat of the moment. Think about your family. Think about your child." "My child?" I asked, my voice finally rising for the first time in this exchange. "Do you really want to talk about my child? Because as far as I know, Felipe is his father, not me. Do you honestly think I'm going to keep paying for everything while she parades around with him like I'm some kind of fool?" Carla tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand to silence her. "I've spent years doing everything for Sabrina. I worked tirelessly, handed over my paycheck every single month, and fulfilled her every whim. And what did I get in return? Betrayal, humiliation, and a family that sees me as nothing more than a walking ATM. This ends now. The silence that followed was deafening. Carla turned to Gustavo, desperate for him to say something that could sway me, but all he could manage was an exasperated sigh. "This is a mistake, Juan. You'll regret it." I met his gaze and replied coldly, "The only mistake I made was not doing this sooner." Without another word, I walked to the door and opened it, signaling it was time for them to leave. Reluctantly, they shuffled out, but not before Carla threw one last warning over her shoulder. "When Sabrina comes back, you'll regret this. She won't let you get away with it." I closed the door without responding, sealing off their noise and negativity. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. I wasn't going to let their empty threats intimidate me. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. I tore through the apartment, removing every trace of Sabrina. Her photos, clothes, trinkets, everything she had left behind was boxed up or thrown out. It was cathartic, a long overdue cleansing of the life I had been trapped in. By the time I finished, the apartment felt like a different space, one where I could finally breathe. Everything that belonged to her was packed in boxes and neatly stacked by the door. The process had been cathartic, even though it took hours of sorting through memories, deciding what stayed and what had to go. When I finally stepped back and looked at the tidy rows of her belongings, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, the house truly felt like mine. No lingering traces of her manipulation, no constant reminders of the life I had been trapped in. Later that day, my phone started vibrating incessantly. Sabrina was trying to call me again. The name flashing on my screen filled me with a mix of irritation and pity. I didn't answer. After a few failed attempts, her call stopped, but my phone buzzed with message after message. At first, they were insults, venomous words meant to tear me down. Then they escalated into threats, the kind that would make someone who didn't know her better feel afraid. She swore she would ruin my life, that I would regret everything, and that I would pay for what she called my betrayal. But then the tone shifted. The messages turned desperate. She started pleading, saying she loved me, that we could fix things, that we were meant to be. It was almost laughable if it wasn't so transparent. I knew her tactics too well to fall for them. It was just another attempt to manipulate me, to claw her way back into my life and control me once again. I ignored every single message and finally blocked her number. Enough was enough. I was determined to move forward, no matter how much it might cost me emotionally or financially. The following night, around 10 o'clock, there was a loud, almost violent knocking at the door. My heart started racing, but part of me wasn't surprised. Deep down, I knew she wouldn't let things end so easily. When I opened the door, there she was, Sabrina, flanked by her loyal cheerleaders, Carla and Gustavo. Sabrina's face was red with fury, and she wasted no time launching into a tirade. "What the hell do you think you're doing? How dare you treat me like this after everything I've done for you?" she screamed, her voice shaking with rage. I couldn't help but laugh, though it was more out of disbelief than amusement. "Everything you've done for me?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sabrina, you spent years treating me like an ATM and a servant while you cheated on me behind my back. And now you have the audacity to show up here and act like the victim?" She tried to barge inside, but I raised my hand firmly. "No, you're not crossing this door. Your things are there." I pointed to the neatly packed boxes. "And I'm going to ask you to leave now before I call the police." For a brief moment she froze, caught off guard by my resolve. But she quickly recovered, her voice rising again as she hurled accusations and called me ungrateful. Carla, ever the enabler, chimed in, insisting that I was being unreasonable. I didn't even bother responding to her. Gustavo, however, stood silently in the background, his expression somewhere between discomfort and regret, as if he knew this whole charade was a mistake. After several more minutes of shouting and empty threats, Sabrina finally grabbed the boxes and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Carla and Gustavo followed, but not without throwing me looks filled with disdain. When the door finally closed, I let out a long breath. I felt both exhausted and strangely relieved. In the days that followed, Sabrina tried every trick in the book to retaliate. She hired a lawyer and filed claims for alimony and division of assets. Despite knowing full well that everything we had was the result of my hard work, she still tried to take what wasn't hers. On top of that, she started spreading vicious rumors among our friends and family, painting me as a cold, calculating monster who had abandoned her. But I was ready for this. My lawyer methodically dismantled every baseless accusation she threw at me. Then, the truth about her relationship with Felipe came to light. It turned out she had been seeing him long before our split. The revelation shattered any remaining sympathy people might have had for her. Her credibility crumbled, and she lost most of the support she had relied on. In the end, the court ruled that she wasn't entitled to anything beyond a small amount to cover temporary expenses, and even that was limited to a few months. The final verdict felt like a massive weight being lifted off my chest. I was finally free. For the first time in years, I could look ahead without the constant burden of trying to satisfy someone who was never content. I realized that every sacrifice I had made for her was in vain. But those wasted years taught me an invaluable lesson. Love without respect is a prison, and no amount of effort can ever make up for a lack of mutual respect. With a renewed sense of purpose, I started planning my future. The months that followed were a slow but steady climb back to stability. It wasn't easy, but every step felt like progress. However, Sabrina wasn't ready to fade into the background. Despite losing the court case and being publicly exposed for her lies and betrayal, she kept trying to provoke me. Sometimes it was through snide, indirect comments on social media. Other times, it was through fresh rumors she spread among acquaintances. What enraged me the most was hearing that she had moved in with Felipe and was openly bragging about supporting him with money she had tried to take from me. The sheer audacity of it was infuriating. But instead of letting her get to me, I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. I knew that her desperation to cling to relevance would eventually fizzle out, and when it did, I would still be standing, stronger and wiser than before. One morning, I received an unexpected call from an old coworker. She told me Sabrina had been bragging openly about still living off the money she received from me in the court settlement. To add insult to injury, she was planning an extravagant party to celebrate what she called her paternal love with Philippe, all while boasting that the entire event was being funded by her idiot ex-husband. Hearing those words made my blood boil. At first, the rage was all-consuming, but beneath the anger was a newfound resolve, a burning determination to put an end to her charade once and for all. The decision to take action wasn't immediate. It came after days of careful thought, reflection, and planning. I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring I wasn't anyone's victim anymore. I began piecing together every detail of her current life through mutual contacts, social media, and eventually, a private investigator. What I discovered was both validating and shocking. Sabrina and Philippe's so-called perfect life was nothing more than a house of cards. While they flaunted an image of luxury and success, the truth was far from glamorous. Sabrina was drowning in debt, Philippe was jobless, and both were living well beyond their means. Sabrina had been using the money she got from me to sustain their lifestyle, but it was nowhere near enough to cover the loans and mounting expenses. Felipe, for his part, seemed perfectly content to leech off Sabrina, who in turn depended entirely on exploiting what she could from me. The party, I learned, was set to be a financial disaster, a desperate attempt to keep up appearances despite the cracks showing everywhere. My first step was to protect myself legally. I reviewed my financial accounts with meticulous detail and discovered Sabrina had been exploiting services still linked to me. From old subscriptions to shared accounts, she had found ways to keep benefiting from my resources. I put an immediate stop to all of it, canceling every single service she had been using. My lawyer also helped me file a motion to revisit the alimony agreement. We argued, with strong evidence, that Sabrina had been misusing the funds for personal luxuries rather than legitimate needs. But I knew legal action alone wasn't enough. Sabrina thrived on the image she projected to the world, and I wanted to shatter that illusion. I hired a private investigator to gather concrete evidence of her relationship with Philippe, her financial manipulation, and her years of deceit. The evidence was staggering. Photos, messages, witness statements. It all painted a damning picture of who Sabrina truly was. Armed with this information, I created an anonymous social media account and began posting the truth. The posts exposed everything. Sabrina's lies, her manipulative tactics, her relationship with Philippe, and the financial mess she was hiding. The revelations spread like wildfire. People in her social circle quickly turned on her, and the guest list for her upcoming party started shrinking by the day. By the time the event rolled around, the damage was already done. On the day of the party, Sabrina tried to proceed as if nothing had happened. She wore her signature fake smile, hoping to salvage what little she could. Philippe, however, was not as composed. He had seen the posts and was seething with anger. According to those who attended, the party descended into chaos when Philippe, clearly intoxicated, confronted Sabrina in front of everyone. He accused her of ruining his life, manipulating him into a relationship he couldn't sustain, and lying about everything. The argument escalated, with harsh words flying back and forth, and most of the guests left before the event was even halfway over. Eventually, Philippe stormed out, leaving Sabrina humiliated and alone. In the days that followed, Sabrina's world crumbled. Her reputation was destroyed, and many of her so-called friends abandoned her. Without a steady source of income or financial support, she was forced to move back in with her parents. From what I heard, her parents weren't thrilled about the situation either. Philippe disappeared soon after, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. Philippe didn't escape unscathed. His involvement in Sabrina's schemes came to light, tarnishing his reputation. He tried to move on, even starting a relationship with another woman, but the shadow of his past followed him everywhere. Trust is hard to rebuild when your actions have hurt so many people. Sabrina's parents, Carla and Gustavo, weren't spared from the consequences either. For years, they had enabled her behavior, defending her choices and attacking anyone who dared criticize her, including me. But with Sabrina back under their roof, broke and disgraced, they faced harsh criticism from their social circle. Even family members called them out for their role in enabling her lies and manipulations. As for me, I finally found peace. After successfully renegotiating the alimony agreement, I recovered some of the money Sabrina had taken from me. I used it to focus on rebuilding my life. I traveled, met new people, and rediscovered passions I had neglected during my marriage. Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries and never let anyone exploit or demean me again. Looking back, I see it all as a painful but necessary lesson. Sabrina's downfall was a direct result of her own actions, and while I didn't set out to destroy her, I had no regrets about defending myself. Life gave me a second chance, and I am determined to make the most of it. Meanwhile, Sabrina and Philippe continue to deal with the ruins of the life they built on lies. Justice, as they say, was served.